Love to sing song.
I'm just a poor boy, no bottom none. He's just a poor boy from a poor family. Bearing his life rise, Boris all the sea. Easy come, will you let me go? Bismillah, no!
Welcome once again to the Tin Dog Podcast. You know, there's something slightly unsettling about hearing Bohemian Rhapsody end with the sound of gunfire. In this week's episode, I'll be talking about episode 11 of series 4, Turn Left. I'll be dedicating this show to someone who's donated to help the Tin Dog Podcast keep running. Thanks to Thomas Sinclair of Littletown, USA. All I really have to say is, wasn't it great? Yep, that's it. That's the entire review. World record for shortest podcast ever. Oh, go on, I'll talk some more about it. This week's episode was originally sold to us as the Dr. Light story. And by that I mean an episode of Doctor Who where the Doctor isn't in it very much. This is a phenomenon mainly linked with the new series, i.e. anything from 2006 onwards, as the 2005 series had the Doctor appearing in every single episode. And so the challenge sits with the writers. Create a story that's undeniably Doctor Who, without the appearance of the main character. The first attempt at this is a story that goes by the name of Love and Monsters, and that really is a love it or hate it kind of an episode, and I'm sure there's a whole show dedicated to that somewhere else. Last year's story, with the Doctor hardly in it, was the award-winning Blink, which really demonstrated that it was possible to have a story that looked and felt like Doctor Who, with the Doctor only in the story on the periphery. Of course, once that trick's been done once, if it's done again immediately afterwards, the audience may kick off, or at least go, it's not quite what I had in mind. And so the writers and production staff had to come up with something different. A Doctor Who story that doesn't have the Doctor in it, that makes the fans happy. And my God, did they manage it this week. I know there are some people out there who didn't like it, but I'm definitely not one of them. Here, the concept of Dr. Light is taken to its logical extreme. It's not a negative point. The entire point of this story really is the Doctor isn't available, and the only downside of this story that I can see, with the exception of some which I'll talk about in a moment, is that if this was your first ever episode of Doctor Who, you might just be a little bit confused. I know for a fact that I really was one of the people who was dreading Catherine Tate taking her role in the series, and I will eat my hat. She has become my favourite companion since the series returned. My ideas about her being an extension of us, the Doctor Who fans, being in the series, has played out to a certain extent, but not completely. And here we see Donna, the Donna of The Runaway Bride, experience a life without the Doctor. We get to see the characteristics that defined her then evolve into something closer to the Donna we've come to know over the last 10 weeks, and we do this through a fairly standard narrative technique. The alternative universe storyline has been well mined in the comic book world, and perhaps the best known example of this sort of thing is in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, starring James Stewart. Now, I don't want to go around spoiling things like that, but the basic premise of nearly all of this type of story, and we've seen examples in Stargate and a host of other shows, is that we take the characters on an emotional journey, we show them, to quote the old game show Bullseye, here's what you could have won in life, take them to the very depths of their existence, and then eventually put all of the chess pieces back into position in a kind of reset fashion in order to let the larger narrative continue. Not only do we get that here, but we get to see some of the finest acting Doctor Who's ever had to show anyone. We've known for some time that Donna has something on her back. It was first mentioned in the Pompeii story, and we instantly assumed that she actually had something on her back there and then. The classic fans amongst us instantly went and cited the old Jon Pertwee story Planet of the Spiders, where Sarah Jane Smith has a spider on her back. The spider link was in there, but it was more to do with the look and feel of the original encounter than anything else. The reality seems to be that she had potentially something on her back, or she would have something on her back later, which goes to answer my original question posed during the library story as to the thing on her back was transported along with the rest of her. Which brings me to the only truly disappointing thing of this whole series, not just this story. The time beetle itself, rather odd in the fact that during Doctor Who Confidential it looked so much more realistic than it did during the actual episode. Now, why you would choose something that so blatantly looks like an ordinary beetle rather than, say, CGIing it up or having something slightly different is odd, especially when it's meant to be part of the Trickster Brigade, as discussed in Sarah Jane Smith's adventures. The Trickster was a humanoid without any eyes. So a re-evolvement or a reimagining of a beetle really shouldn't have been that much of an issue. The thing was not that impressive. It looked a bit like a backpack from time to time, which is sad, because the rest of the story was just marvellous. This story was obviously written from a series of lists. The first list, that I imagine sitting on Russell's desk, would have been, if Donna hadn't met the Doctor, what would have happened on Earth? And so he made a list of all of the events that have happened in Doctor Who in current Earth history and struck them off one at a time, working out what would have happened if the Doctor hadn't have interceded. Obviously, first off is the Runaway Bride storyline, and we can assume that a different bride was part of that story, and we can also assume she probably died the same time as the 10th Doctor. And then, rather mechanically, we go through every single other event, each building on the side effects of the one that went before it, the Titanic and all sorts. Now, was it just me, or did you remember that if the Titanic slapped into the Earth, half of the Earth would be destroyed, rather than the south of England? Now, I have heard that it had something to do with the Doctor fixing the engines, but I'm not completely sold on this. Similarly, in a radiation-soaked England and an Adepoys-struck America, would the Sontarans truly still want to use the Atmos device to turn everyone into Sontarans? That, again, I'm not completely convinced about. But all of this is skirting around the main issue, Rose's return. Now, I know I'm on record as saying that I'm not a big fan of Rose coming back, as it cheapens her departure, but we haven't heard her full motivation. We haven't seen the way that it's justified, and I'm sure we will over the next 2 episodes. And so I'm reserving judgment. I reserve the right to be wrong. People have said that Rose looks different than she did. Well, as an actress, of course she has. She's grown, she's evolved. Some people have said she's lost weight. Well, that's hardly a crime. I mean, most of us look slightly different than we did 3 years ago. So let's not pick on Billy just yet. It's interesting to note that she's on record as saying that she had to buy the DVDs of her own performance so that she could try and get Rose's voice right again, because she'd been playing some posh birds of late, which is fair enough. But what surprised me about that statement was that she had to nip out and actually buy them. Surely someone at the BBC would have given her own DVDs if she'd asked nicely. I'm sure they've got a couple of sets lying around. Another of Russell's lists, of course, was what happened to everyone connected with the Doctor. He made a small list: Captain Jack, Torchwood, Sarah Jane Smith, Martha Jones, killed them all off on camera and crossed them all off one at a time. Bloodthirsty in many respects, but the story and the narrative had to reduce the threat and its eventual solution down to one person. It had to focus on Donna, and that's exactly what it did. Of course, some people might get a little bit annoyed. For example, Donna has travelled in time. Now, we know she went to the Ood Sphere, so that's the future, but she also went to Pompeii. So what happens to Pompeii and therefore the Earth if the Doctor hadn't gone there? Some people would say the Earth would have ended, and therefore it negates this entire plot. Similarly, with Martha Jones and the Shakespeare Code, if the witches had opened their dimensional gateway, what difference would that have made to Earth? But that's the sort of nonsense that all us Doctor Who fans like to talk about ad infinitum. England and the whole world is reduced to something akin to England seen in V for Vendetta, a stark, dreary place, where places like Leeds have ghettos, managing to make the Second World War concentration camp ghettos just a little bit more real for anyone studying history. Oh, things like that could never happen here. Perhaps they could, perhaps they couldn't, but they can in this universe. We've seen totalitarian states before on Earth, even in alternate Earths like the one seen in Inferno. But this one's brought to life by fabulous performances from Bernard Cribbins, and more impressively even than that, from Jacqueline King playing Sylvia Noble. On film courses you're taught that in every single thing you do, have one scene or shot that completely blows the viewer away. In this, Jacqueline King provides us with that shot. It's not effects heavy, it's not anything, it is merely her reaction shot to Donna. We never pull focus, we never leave her, we're never allowed as an audience to look away. We are experiencing the emotion of that scene in the role. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance. And of course Bernard Cribbins is fabulous when he says,
Labour camps. That's what they called them last time.
a moment that I'm sure will live in Doctor Who fandom for some time. And so Rose starts telling Donna all about her destiny, about the alternate Earth, which of course she doesn't believe until she sees the stars going out. Now obviously if stars are being blotted out one at a time, they would have to have been blotted out at various points in their own history in order for the darkness to reach Earth simultaneously. More likely is that approaching Earth is something that gets in the way of the light from the stars. Now I don't want to give any spoilers away about the next episode, but the idea of a large fleet approaching Earth would be enough to blot out most starlight. The end of this story brings us a nod to two very specific old Doctor Who stories. The first is a Dalek story where they travel in time. I believe it's Evil of the Daleks, using mirrors and clocks and an assortment of very dubious technology. And the second is reminiscent of Kinder, a Fifth Doctor story, where the creature is trapped in its own reflection. It also is more than reminiscent of Trini and Susanna's 360 mirror thing. So what were they going to do? Give Donna some sort of makeover? How to look good time travelling? Yeah, perhaps not. Before I sign off, and we start getting more than a little bit excited about next week's episode, and of course the end of this series, we need to discuss a couple of things. First is Bad Wolf. And for those of you who don't quite get the whole Bad Wolf thing, what I'll do is I'll put a link to it on the website. But I suggest you watch the last episode of the 2005 season, and that should fill you in. But all you really need to know is that, as the Doctor says, it's a message about the end of the universe. Before I sign off with something new, here's a word from our friends at the CIA. Cult them in audio.
Hi, this is Dave AC inviting you to CIA Podcast.
Now called Cultum in Audio. Too busy talking to Sarada.
I sound like something out of the Terrorhawks.
Type in drink going undercover and his Aston Martin is saving the world. And Ian is here. Hello, Ian.
Hello. That makes a change. You had a good thought.
Ian says the word GG. Ian is here as usual, but he's Dave.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here, but that is one of my other little foibles.
And now we've moved into Highlander, and I don't even know how that happened.
I think I need to get ahead of the game here.
Blink, Doctor Who, then Highlander.
Could have done with some of those at the con.
You know,
and of course I have to say, this is Ian in the groove. Ian, I interviewed GG Edgley.
Green-skinned Orion slave girls. Wow. Dave, what's it like to drive the Aston Martin? You gotta jump in there. It's like free-for-all. I had a good thought, dude. It might have been even.
Scoot him in audio.
Sometimes it's like having a family where you gotta fight for that last piece of chicken.
Until you mentioned Wendy Pedbury.
The chicken references were flying like crazy. So it's our show. Oh, and Ian was like, rule for it. I was, we're going to leave you with this.
For God's sake, let's get out of here.
She remembered my name.
Just silent. There was no answer to that.
GG Edgley's like right inside the door. I'm like, well, go in and talk to her. He's like, nah. This is after he'd spent an hour at the bar drinking with Jerry Doyle from Babylon 5, and that's
my other tagline. Ian,
at that time,
Jerry Doyle bought me a whiskey visit.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
We're on Talk Shoe number 30659 Pound Key, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We cover all areas of science fiction, including Doctor Who. See you next Sunday. Bye.
Well worth attending and listening. Of course you can find them on iTunes. Now before I go, I just want to introduce something brand new to the podcast. Imagine a universe, if you will, where astrology isn't decided by the 12 normal star signs, but by what episode of Doctor Who was playing when you were born. I myself were born just in time for the Sea Devils, which of course would be a water sign. This started off as a thread on the SFX magazine Doctor Who forums, and someone suggested that I read some of them out as part of the show. So, if you'd like your Who-strology read out, email me at the address at the end of the show, and I'll do it soon. Here's a few examples. My advice for people born during Time in the Rani is as follows. Stay away from giant brains and creatures with far too many eyes. Change is necessary for growth, but be careful what you do with spoons and redheads. I think that says a lot. The Chase. Beware of meeting Peter Purvis twice. He may have a panda that he will forget, but pay it no heed. It is a good day for meeting round people who take things literally. Maybe a visit to the fun fair or a cruise is on the cards. And finally, a piece of advice for anyone born during Pyramids of Mars. You make friends with someone who looks like a teacher or a general. You may get wrapped up in your enemy's plans, but remember, most puzzles are simpler to solve than to explain. Seeing what might have been is not always a healthy thing. Beware of a tall, thin dog. His bite is worse than his bark. And with that, I'll call an end to this week's Tin Dog podcast. And to play out, we have Eagle Striker's possible film music for any potential Doctor Who movie. As always, this is taken from the fabulous Who Mix website, where you can find the original version of this track and leave comments for Eagle Striker. Be seeing you. You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.